Before CGI, before green screens, before lightsabers and orcs, there was Jason and the Argonauts, a handcrafted myth so epic it practically birthed modern fantasy cinema. Legendary stop-motion wizard Ray Harryhausen turned Greek gods and monsters into living nightmares using nothing but patience, precision, and plasticine. From the towering bronze giant Talos to the bone-rattling skeleton army, every frame was sculpted by hand, and the results are still stunning 60 years later. Grab your sword, polish your sandals, and brace yourself for lightning bolts, monsters, and movie miracles, because here are 20 wild facts about Jason and the Argonauts that'll blow your myth-loving mind. While most 1960s epics filled studios with armies of technicians, Jason and the Argonauts monsters came from one man, Ray Harryhausen, working alone in a tiny London space nicknamed the Dungeon. Using a Mitchell 35mm camera and self-built rigs, Harryhausen animated miniature models frame by frame, sometimes working for days just to capture a few seconds of usable footage. He logged everything in notebooks, marking each limb movement in millimeters. His patience turned Greek myth into movie history. Talos' slow metallic turn, the harpies' shrieks, and that seven-headed Hydra. Each was photographed one click at a time. The whole creature work took nearly 2 years. That's why every motion still feels weirdly alive. It's literally the rhythm of a man's heartbeat made visible. The climactic skeleton fight is cinema legend, but the chaos behind it was insane. Harryhausen spent 4.5 months animating 7 skeleton warriors against actors who weren't actually there. Live-action plates were filmed first, with stuntmen pretending to duel invisible foes. Then Harryhausen rewound that footage frame by frame to match sword swings and eye lines, sometimes spending an entire day animating just 5 seconds. Each skeleton was a 9-inch metal armature painted with bone dust and wired jaws. The crew joked that Ray was dueling himself to death. The result? A sequence so seamless that even Spielberg and Peter Jackson cited as their cinematic awakening. To this day, the scene makes modern CGI look almost lazy. Talos, the towering bronze guardian who creaks to life, was inspired by the Colossus of Rhodes and ancient Greek Kouros statues. Harryhausen studied museum casts to get the metallic stance right, then coated the stop-motion model in powdered bronze and lacquer for a lifelike patina. The groaning hinge noises were created from layers of slowed-down mechanical sounds, giving Talos his eerie, ancient machine quality. Every kid in 1963 thought Talos was a real giant. If you had to face one Greek monster, Talos, the Hydra, or the Harpies, who'd you fight? Drop your answer below and hit like if you just run. The seven-headed Hydra guarding the Golden Fleece pushed stop-motion into uncharted territory. Each head had separate ball joints and tensioned wires hidden through the latex skin. Because the creature filled the frame, Ray had to animate 49 moving parts per frame, 7 heads, 14 eyes, and countless coils. He called it a mathematical nightmare. The model constantly sagged from its own weight, so he reinforced the tail with steel guitar strings. When Jason slashes the heads, they collapse into pre-scored sections coated with melted wax for a fleshy texture. Harryhausen later said the Hydra taught him patience bordering on madness. And he wasn't kidding. By the time the scene wrapped, the camera had clicked over 480,000 times. The full-size Argo you see sailing through Greek waters was actually 2 ships. The first, built from fiberglass over a wooden hull, cracked under pressure during sea shoots near Italy's Amalfi coast. A second, lighter version was constructed with detachable sections to survive repeated takes. Miniature Argos were also made for the storm scenes, each around 6 feet long and mounted in a wave tank with wind fans. Crewmen called them bathtub battleships. Between live ships, miniatures, and matte-painted skies, the illusion of a grand voyage was complete. None of it was digital, just clever engineering and ocean-soaked determination. The screeching harpies that torment the blind prophet Phineas required marionette rigs suspended from cranes. When shooting in Naples, high winds kept tangling the fishing lines, and the harpies would crash into crew members mid-take. Harryhausen used rubber wings reinforced with aluminum rods, painted translucent gray for eerie translucence. To simulate their fluttering descent, assistants blew compressed air hoses across the puppets. Actor Patrick Troughton, later Doctor Who, recalled ducking genuine bruises. The effect was worth the chaos. The harpies' jittery motion became a signature Harryhausen creep effect, copied endlessly in later monster movies. Mount Olympus might look grand, but the Temple of the Gods was a forced perspective miniature only 8 feet wide. Clouds were created using a milk tank technique, a clear tank filled with water and injected with colored milk swirls, filmed upside down to mimic drifting heavens. The gods themselves stood on raised platforms surrounded by dry ice fog. Matte paintings extended the set infinitely upward. The result feels divine yet tactile, a blueprint for how to fake scale decades before digital compositing existed. Even Kubrick later studied the footage for lessons in perspective. When Jason's blade clashes with monsters, the sparks aren't animation, they're practical. The stunt sword was fitted with embedded pyrotechnic caps that ignited on impact with flint inserts hidden in props. This created authentic flashes caught by the high-speed camera. During stop-motion inserts, Harryhausen enhanced the effect by adding single-frame light flares during animation, blending real sparks with stop-motion precision, an old-school rotoscope hack. The blend between live sparks and drawn ones made every battle feel fierce, decades before digital compositing. Nigel Green's booming portrayal of Hercules gave the film unexpected comic relief. His on-set improvisations, like wrestling real boulders or ad-libbing by the gods that hurt, cracked up the crew. He and Todd Armstrong, Jason, trained together for the fight scenes using weighted wooden clubs instead of props. Green's larger-than-life energy helped, balanced Jason's calm heroism, and audiences loved it so much that Columbia considered a Hercules spin-off. Sadly, Green passed away a few years later, but his version remains a fan favorite. Who's the better movie, Hercules, Nigel Green, Kevin Sorbo, or Dwayne Johnson? Sound off below and hit like if Green wins by mythic default. After months of painstaking animation, Harryhausen refused to toss his beloved monsters into the trash. Once Jason and the Argonauts wrapped, he stored the Hydra's 7 latex heads and torsos in his London studio warehouse, like a morgue for movie beasts. Years later, he revived them in pieces. Some heads reappeared in Sinbad and The Eye of the Tiger, 1977, while the tail design inspired a serpent in First Men in the Moon, 1964. He often joked that no creature truly dies, they just get recast. The latex, though, didn't age well. Decades of heat and humidity made the rubber crack, forcing him to coat the models in wax to preserve them. Today, one surviving Hydra head still exists in the Ray Harryhausen Foundation Museum in Scotland, battered, faded, and somehow still sinister. Even after 60 years, that gnarled snout reminds visitors of the moment when handmade monsters ruled cinema. When Jason unplugs Talos' heel and molten ichor gushes out, it's pure mythology meeting movie wizardry. Ray Harryhausen and effects artist Les Bowie didn't have digital fluids or CGI back in 1963, so they improvised with molten wax. They used colored liquid mixed with metallic powder and filmed it in slow motion to mimic divine blood draining from the bronze giant. The Talos model was rigged with hidden tubes and heat lamps to make the fluid shimmer like metal. That simple but clever trick created one of cinema's most unforgettable death scenes, a god bleeding from his only weak spot. Even film historians call it one of the most poetic moments in visual effects history. No computer, no hydraulics, just patience, paint, and physics. If you'd seen that molten gold oozing out on the big screen in '63, would you have guessed it was candle wax? Be honest and drop your answer below. Before Hollywood had CGI, Ray Harryhausen had dynamation. He coined the word to describe his revolutionary process of blending live action and stop motion. By projecting real footage onto a rear screen behind his models, he could animate creatures as if they existed in the same world as human actors. It meant Jason could swing a sword at a skeleton, and the skeleton would strike back, all in camera, no digital compositing. The term wasn't just technical, it was branding genius. Posters proudly shouted "filmed in dynamation," as if it were a superpower. Audiences had no idea how he pulled it off, and studios didn't care. They just knew it worked. Decades later, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg cited dynamation as a direct influence on Star Wars and Jurassic Park. Harryhausen didn't just animate monsters, he animated the entire future of visual effects. Long before he worked in film, Harryhausen was a monster-obsessed kid filling sketchbooks with creatures he wished existed. Among his earliest drawings was a multi-headed serpent labeled the Hydra. He drew it after watching King Kong, 1933, the film that inspired his career. Decades later, that same childhood doodle became the blueprint for Jason's greatest battle. He even kept the original drawing pinned in his workshop during animation, a reminder of where it all started. The Hydra sequence let him push his timing and choreography skills further than ever. 7 heads, 7 rhythms, one unstoppable beast. The layering of attacks, camera angles, and synchronized tail lashes made it a technical miracle. What started as a 13-year-old's imagination became one of the most iconic movie monsters ever built. Proof that sometimes childhood daydreams really can conquer the world, or at least the box office. The skeleton battle, now considered the crown jewel of stop motion, nearly destroyed its creator. For 4 relentless months, Harryhausen animated each bony warrior frame by frame, moving arms, legs, and weapons by millimeters. Each day's work produced only about 13 seconds of usable footage. Worse, there was no playback system, so he couldn't see his progress until the film was developed days later. If even one sword stroke didn't align with the live-action footage, he had to start over. His wrist seized up halfway through production, forcing him to tie a pencil to his fingers just to continue marking frames. The finished scene is barely 3 minutes long, but it revolutionized fantasy cinema. When the skeletons erupt from the ground, audiences screamed, then applauded. It's still one of the most electrifying battles ever filmed. Which movie skeleton army scared you most, this one or Army of Darkness? Comment below and hit like if Harryhausen wins. Jason's gleaming sword wasn't a lightweight prop, it was a real bronze replica based on ancient Greek designs. The production team had two versions, a heavy hero sword for close-ups and a hollow aluminum one for stunts. Actor Todd Armstrong reportedly complained that the bronze version weighed so much it nearly slipped from his hands during the Hydra fight. Director Don Chaffee insisted on using it anyway because it reflected light beautifully against the Mediterranean backdrop. Each blade was forged by an Italian blacksmith who specialized in historical replicas for museums. The artistry paid off. The sword's weight made Armstrong move slower and more cautiously, giving his duels a believable struggle. In a film filled with magic, even the weapons had authentic craftsmanship. If you could wield one cinematic weapon, Jason's sword, Luke's lightsaber, or Thor's hammer, which would you choose? Drop your pick below and smash that, like if you're a sword loyalist. Bernard Herrmann, famous for scoring Psycho and Vertigo, delivered Jason and the Argonauts' thundering soundtrack in a mere 6 weeks. His schedule was so tight that he reused motifs from his earlier Sinbad scores, transforming them into something darker and more heroic. Herrmann composed and recorded the thunderous score on a tight schedule, using bold brass and percussion to give each monster its own voice. His approach was revolutionary. He treated the monsters like characters, giving each their own theme. The skeletons got sharp percussion, Talos had pounding brass, and the gods were surrounded by heavenly strings. The result? A score that feels mythic, terrifying, and timeless. Even today, filmmakers cite Herrmann's Jason soundtrack as one of the greatest adventure scores ever written. No wonder George Lucas used it as temp music while editing Star Wars in 1977. Nigel Green, who played Hercules, clashed with director Don Chaffee during shooting. The crew worried he looked too old and too serious next to the youthful Jason. At one point, some crew members worried Green looked older than the heroic ideal, but his commanding presence ultimately made Hercules unforgettable. But when rushes came back, Harryhausen fought to keep him, arguing that Green's imposing physique gave the film needed gravitas. Green trained for weeks to lift the massive stone prop during the opening temple scene, which, fun fact, was made of lightweight plaster, but still weighed over 70 pounds. His performance gave Hercules a gruff charm that balanced the film's youthful energy. Ironically, audiences later named him one of the best versions of the mythic hero ever put to screen. Sometimes too old just means too perfect. To film the Argonauts' daring escape through the clashing rocks, the effects crew built a 12-foot-wide miniature sea set, complete with hydraulically powered cliffs. Instead of CGI, they used hidden pistons and air bladders to slam the cliffs together in sync with Harryhausen's animated waves. The clashing rocks were filmed with miniature cliffs and air-powered rigs slamming together in sync with water effects, all achieved with practical engineering. Harryhausen even placed tiny birds near the cliffs to sell the sense of scale. Watching the rocks smash together in perfect rhythm still feels more real than most modern digital oceans, all achieved with wood, water, and wizardry. You'd think Jason and the Argonauts was an instant hit, but when it premiered in 1963, it actually underperformed. Competing against Cleopatra and Lawrence of Arabia, audiences were more drawn to big-name stars than mythic puppets. Critics praised the effects, but found the story old-fashioned. Yet over time, the film's legend grew. By the late 70s, it was a TV staple, introducing new generations to Greek myth and monster magic. When Star Wars hit, fans suddenly recognized Harryhausen as the godfather of fantasy cinema. Today, Jason and the Argonauts is consistently ranked among the greatest adventure films ever made. It didn't conquer opening weekend, it conquered time itself. Out of his entire career, Sinbad, Clash of the Titans, Mysterious Island, Harryhausen always said Jason and the Argonauts was his proudest achievement. It had everything he said in interviews: gods, monsters, heroes, and just enough madness. He often screamed the skeleton fight to aspiring animators to show them what patience looks like. In his home studio, the original Hydra head and Talos models sat side by side, both scarred from years of handling but still menacing. When asked if he'd ever remake Jason with modern technology, he smiled. Why improve perfection? Even Peter Jackson and Guillermo del Toro later called the movie their biggest childhood inspiration. For Harryhausen, Jason and the Argonauts wasn't just a job, it was his myth come to life, one frame at a time. Conclusion. And there you have it, 20 wild, handcrafted facts about the movie that turned mythology into motion and inspired 1,000 fantasy films. Jason and the Argonauts wasn't built with computers or corporations. It was built with sweat, clay, and genius. Every roar, every clash, every stop-motion twitch came from one man's belief that imagination beats technology every time. So, which scene amazed you most? Talos rising, the Hydra's strike, or the skeleton army's impossible duel? Drop your favorite below, and if this legendary film still gives you goosebumps, hit like and subscribe for more cinematic deep dives into movie magic's greatest myths.